Space opera. It's a term bandied about, but what is it exactly? Is it like obscene materials, you know it when you see it? In the annals of time, amidst the vastness of the cosmos, where tales of heroes, villains and interstellar civilizations unfold, this is the chronicle of the space opera. Prepare for a celestial odyssey where we unravel the sagas of the stars and witness epic battles that shape the very fabric of the universe. Sounds melodramatic, right? Yes, it does, and that's right up space opera's alley. The label space opera was allegedly coined in 1941 by science fiction author Wilson Tucker. He intended it as a derogatory term in an article he wrote in a science fiction magazine. Space opera was his derivation of soap opera, tacky serial radio shows of the time, many of which were sponsored by soap manufacturers. Tucker was not a fan of the form, as it was known then, it seems, describing space operas of the day as hacky, grinding, stinking, outworn spaceship yarns. Let's try to define it a little, give it some shape and substance. Space opera is a subgenre of science fiction, characterised by its grand and adventurous storytelling, set in space or in futuristic settings. It often features epic and sweeping narratives, larger-than-life characters, advanced technology, interstellar travel and complex intergalactic societies. Here are some key elements of space opera. Scale is important. Space operas typically involve vast, galaxy-spanning conflicts, often pitting heroes against formidable villains or empires. The setting prominently includes space travel, often via advanced spacecraft capable of faster-than-light travel, wormholes or other speculative means. Protagonists in space operas are often heroic figures, rebels or adventurers who embark on epic journeys facing moral dilemmas and personal growth. Space opera frequently explores encounters with diverse alien species, each with its own unique culture and biology. Sometimes the aliens are the baddies, sometimes they're in an alliance with the heroic humans, and sometimes both. These stories showcase advanced technologies, from advanced weaponry and starships to futuristic gadgets and AI companions. Space operas often delve into complex political and social themes such as totalitarian regimes, rebellion, and questions of ethics in an intergalactic context. While space operas may have action-packed sequences, they usually explore character relationships, personal struggles, and emotional depth. Space opera can incorporate mythic and romantic storytelling elements, often emphasizing the triumph of good over evil and epic romances. Doc Smith is usually considered to be the father of the space opera, with his Skylark series, the first of which was written before 1920, but didn't appear in magazine form until the late 1920s, and in book form after that in the 1930s. There are spaceships, deadly rivalries, revolutionary technology, hitting some of the high notes of the characteristics we just went over. The golden age of space opera is usually considered to be the 1930s through to the 1950s. During this time, space opera flourished and became a prominent subgenre of science fiction. Several key factors contributed to the rise of the golden age of space opera. Pulp science fiction magazines such as Amazing Stories, Astounding Science Fiction and Planet Stories provided a platform for the publication of space opera stories. These magazines reached a wide readership and featured many space opera tales. The period following World War II and the early years of the Cold War saw a fascination with the possibilities of space exploration and technology. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union added to the allure of space-themed stories. Scientific discoveries and advancements such as rocketry and atomic energy captured the public's imagination and inspired writers to envision space adventures. Prolific authors like Doc Smith, Isaac Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke were at the forefront of space opera during this era. Their work, such as Smith's Lensman series, Asimov's Foundation series, contributing significantly to the popularity of the genre. Space opera stories often featured heroic characters embarking on epic adventures in futuristic settings. These themes resonated with readers and provided a sense of escapism during a time of global uncertainty. Space opera introduced innovative concepts, including galactic empires, alien civilizations, and advanced technology, which expanded the imaginative scope of science fiction. Finally, space opera stories from this era, like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, became popular in other media, including radio, film serials, and comic strips, further cementing their cultural impact. But if Wilson Tucker is to be believed, the prevailing view back in the 1940s then seems to be that space opera is a schlocky thing of the past, a phase science fiction went through that we should all be relieved to be past, best left alone. And that might have been the end of it there, I suppose, but there must be enduring appeal. Appreciation for space opera has changed over time. In his 1974 anthology, Space Opera, Clearly a Labour of Love, Brian Aldiss resists trying to define it too closely. Instead, he compares space opera to the deep layers of sedimentary rock upon which the rest of science fiction and its future is built. Fossils lie within, evidence of the early evolutionary stages of science fiction. He says that science fiction is a big, muscular, horny creature with a massive bristling antenna and proprioceptors on its skull. It has a younger sister, a gentle creature with red lips and a dash of stardust in her hair, and her name is space opera. He goes on to say science fiction is for real and space opera is for fun. There is swash to be buckled, planets to save, desperate quests, exotic creatures, dusky and potentially scantily clad space princesses, grave peril, and all of this must resolve neatly at the end. Here is the future of space, seen mistily through the eyes of yesterday. In their 2006 book, The Space Opera Renaissance, Hartley and Kramer defined space opera as colourful, dramatic, large-scale science fiction adventure, competently and sometimes beautifully written, usually focused on a sympathetic, heroic central character and plot action, and usually set in a relatively distant future and in space or on other worlds. Characteristically optimistic in tone. It often deals with war, piracy, military virtues, and very large-scale action with large stakes. A setting beyond Earth is essential for space opera, but being on a spaceship or visiting planets isn't the only qualifier. There must be sufficient scale, melodrama and scope to elevate the story from being merely space-based to being space opera. So what? Why should we care about space opera? Well, space opera often serves as a gateway for newcomers to the science fiction genre. Its grand and adventurous narratives, coupled with relatable heroic characters, can draw in audiences who may not typically engage with more technical or hard science fiction. Space opera places a strong emphasis on imagination and wonder, taking readers and viewers on epic journeys to distant galaxies and alien worlds. It offers a sense of escapism and invites audiences to dream about the possibilities of space travel and exploration. Despite the sometimes flashy and action-packed exterior, space opera frequently delves into complex social, political and ethical issues. It provides a platform for exploring themes such as authoritarianism, rebellion, diversity and the consequences of advanced technology. Space opera has inspired real-world advancements in science and technology. Concepts introduced in these stories, such as communication satellites and tablet computers, have influenced scientists and engineers. Iconic space opera franchises like Star Wars have left an indelible mark on popular culture. Characters like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, along with memorable starships like the Millennium Falcon, have become cultural touchstones, albeit on the silver screen. Space opera's vast settings and imaginative worlds allow for creative storytelling possibilities that transcend the limitations of earthbound narratives. This subgenre has expanded the horizons of storytelling and challenged writers and filmmakers to push the boundaries of their craft. Space opera often blends epic action with deep emotional resonance. And this emotional connection with characters and their struggles can make the stories not only thrilling but also deeply moving, leaving a lasting impact on us, the audience. Space opera did have a lull in the late 20th century. It didn't go away exactly, but other strong influences on the genre emerged which stole its thunder. The late 20th century saw a shift in readers' and viewers' tastes. Many enthusiasts began gravitating towards more character-driven and socially relevant narratives. Space opera, with its focus on grand adventures and cosmic settings, once more started to seem dated to some audiences. The emergence of cyberpunk as a subgenre in the 1980s offered a stark contrast to space opera. Cyberpunk stories were often set in a dystopian near future and explored themes of corporate control, technology and urban decay. Authors like William Gibson and Neil Stephenson gained popularity with works like Neuromancer and Snow Crash, drawing attention away from space opera. Many readers and viewers sought more complex and realistic portrayals of space and science fiction. They were drawn to narratives that explored the consequences of advanced technology and portrayed space travel with a greater degree of scientific accuracy. This preference for hard science fiction led to a decline in the popularity of space opera's more fantastical elements. With the accumulated weight of space opera publishing over the decades, the market had become saturated with space opera works, leading to a sense of repetition and fatigue. Some felt that the genre had exhausted its storytelling possibilities and was recycling familiar tropes. Additionally, cultural shifts in the late 20th century led to different forms of entertainment and cultural influences, which affected the demand for space opera. Despite this decline in the late 20th century, it's important to note that space opera never completely disappeared. Instead, it evolved and adapted to the changing times. Authors like Ian M. Banks and his Culture series, and TV series like Babylon 5 and Farscape demonstrated that space opera could still find an audience and still innovate within the genre. So space opera hasn't remained a historical entity then. It's not merely a fossil in the science fiction sediment to be unearthed by intrepid literary archaeologists. It's alive and kicking, and it has evolved. The space opera of the 1980s was in part a rejection of the old, and influenced by the edgier cyberpunk emerging at the same time. Darker, gnarlier, with newer, more realistic technology and stronger characterization. Paul Macaulay, a pretty mean space opera singer himself, said that the new space opera, the good new space opera, cheerfully plunders the tropes and toys of the old school The secondary sources from Blish to Delaney refurbish them with up-to-the-minute science and deploy them in epic narratives where intimate human-scale stories are at least as relevant as the wide Baroque backgrounds on which they cast their shadows. He goes on to make a similar point to Aldous. The new space opera is all built on the schlocky foundations of the 1920s and 1930s. To paraphrase Battlestar Galactica, all this has happened before and will happen again. British authors of the early 21st century kept the flame not just alight but burning brightly. The likes of Alistair Reynolds, Ian Banks, Peter Hamilton, Ian MacDonald, and Charles Stross, all aware of the footprints in which they walk, but all intent on doing it better, harder, faster, and to have fun while doing it. New directions in space opera have emerged in recent years, reflecting evolving societal concerns, advances in technology, and a desire for fresh storytelling approaches within the genre. Contemporary space opera works are increasingly embracing inclusivity and diversity in their character portrayals. They feature protagonists from a wide range of backgrounds, genders, and cultures, reflecting a more representative and inclusive vision of the future. New space operas often delve into complex socio-political themes, exploring issues such as governance, colonialism, power structures, and the consequences of advanced technology. These narratives provide thought-provoking commentary on contemporary societal challenges. And while space opera has traditionally focused on epic plots and settings, contemporary works pay more attention to character development and relationships. This shift adds emotional depth to the genre, making readers and viewers more invested in their personal journeys of the protagonists. Some modern space operas incorporate elements of hard science fiction, aiming for greater scientific accuracy and realism in their depictions of space travel, physics, and technology. This approach caters to audiences seeking plausible and scientifically grounded narratives. Space opera is increasingly crossing genre boundaries, blending elements of other genres like cyberpunk, fantasy, and even horror. This fusion of genres results in unique and innovative storytelling. New space operas often present morally ambiguous characters and situations, challenging traditional notions of heroes and villains. These shades of grey add complexities to the narratives and provoke ethical reflection. Some contemporary space operas incorporate environmental and climate change themes, reflecting growing concerns about the environment and sustainability. These stories explore the consequences of human actions on a cosmic scale. With advancements in artificial intelligence and discussions around transhumanism, modern space operas frequently explore the implications of advanced AI, human augmentation, and the blurring of human and machine boundaries. Contemporary space operas often employ interconnected storytelling across multiple books or seasons, creating intricate and immersive universes. This approach allows for an in-depth exploration of diverse characters and plot threads. The continuing appeal of space opera lies in its ability to transport us, the audience, to imaginative realms, to spark contemplation about the universe and humanity, to provide a sense of adventure, hope, and wonder. This journey through space opera may be ending, but the voyage into the cosmos never truly concludes. I plan to revisit this topic in the coming weeks. What are some of your favourite space operas, old or new? What ideas do you have for future space opera videos? Is there anything you'd like me to cover? In the meantime, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep reaching for the stars. Let's continue to celebrate the wonders and mysteries of the universe. And until we meet on another astral escapade, goodbye for now.